we do like a quick round of introductions to make sure that everybody is introduced. I think Chris, I guess. You just spoke, so.
I just spoke.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Dick, I'm Chief Product Officer at Nanoleaf.
I'm Stuart Cheshire, an engineer working on networking at Apple.
Mark Tikip with Samsung SmartThings, VP of Product.
Jonathan Hui, software engineer at Google.
Sujata Naidag, VP of Marketing for Thread Group, and then also Marketing Director, Wireless Connectivity at NXP.
Gabe Castle, Product Manager, Amazon.
All right, thank you. So I guess I'm going to kick it off with probably asking this question for Nathan and probably the Thread Group members. What are your key motivations for supporting Thread in smart homes?
It's put on the spot first. Motivations.
Yeah, I'm happy to start.
Pardon?
Nathan, you want Gabe to?
Being recorded.
Oh yeah, was that not what I was doing? Yeah, so key motivations for using Thread. So I think, for us, we're a lighting manufacturer. We're most well known for our light panels, but we brought our light bulbs to market with HomeKit over Threads. Our story, we started with Bluetooth mesh, and we really wanted to go Thread. There was no application layer, dominant anyway. And obviously Matter changed that story. HomeKit was one of the leading pieces there. But we see the Thread mesh as much more scalable for home automation than Wi-Fi. And I guess that's the short story.
Okay. Any of the Thread Group members want to highlight?
Yeah. So I think from the Eero perspective at Amazon, Thread, it is application layer agnostic, and so as an infrastructure builder, it makes a lot of sense for us to provide it to other companies, other products to use, without having to do a lot of work to support them in their application layer. From the Amazon side, I think it's really about choice. As we see Matter coming, we're heavily invested in BLE Mesh and Zigbee, and helping Wi-Fi devices get connected. And Thread's just another network layer to support, to give customers choice, so that when they bring a device in their home, they don't have to think about whether they have Thread connectivity.
Great. I can go next. From Samsung SmartThings perspective, this week we're actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary. So it's
congratulations.
It's a fun week. But looking back over the last 10 years as a pioneer in smart home, we've always been an open platform supporting a lot of the leading standards that have existed, and we've seen the challenges that consumers have faced using the technology. And I think we're all excited about what's happening with Matter to address some of those pain points. Thread being a foundational technology within Matter, that's one of the key motivators. But one thing that we haven't really talked about yet is, Gabe talked about kind of the application layer being agnostic there. But the other piece is like the kind of ability for a shared or common mesh in the home that can be used across manufacturers and ecosystems. And we think that having that kind of common IP backbone for everybody to work on and build experiences on it's going to unlock a lot of opportunities for everybody, and kind of like the rising tide that lifts all boats. So
yeah. Jonathan or Stuart, from a technology standpoint, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah. Nest has been trying to deliver Thread for a very long time, and one of the key aspects of that was really to allow us to build whole solutions, whole experiences that would combine multiple link technologies together simultaneously. Right? It's not that Thread is the best technology for everything. Right? We know Wi-Fi has its place, Ethernet has its place, and we really wanted to leverage all of those technologies simultaneously without having to develop application proxies or supporting multiple application layers, just to make those experiences happen.
You want to add anything? Okay. All right. Okay. So Mark, I guess you talked about like a shared IP mesh in the home. That does raise up the question of privacy and security. So can, I guess, the panel take this question across the board in terms of what are your thoughts on the defense in depth kind of aspects that you need in terms of both security and kind of the privacy aspects as well? Because, there can be concerns about there's one single network that can bring my entire house down, kind of a concern, right? So how do you address privacy and security with that common shared mesh backbone. So can you talk a bit about the defense and depth that you need across the app layer and the infrastructure layers?
Sure. When you're working in shared spectrum, a badly behaved device can do a lot of damage anyway. So given that all of these devices are working in the same spectrum, having them cooperate with each other, actually it's a lot more efficient use of the spectrum than having them act without knowledge of each other. And in today's world, in any IP networking, end-to-end security is absolutely crucial. We no longer rely on having unencrypted protocols and hope that the network is safe. And Matter has certainly embraced that with strong end-to-end encryption, just like HomeKit does. So in today's world, just like we have multiple sources of traffic sharing internet connections, having multiple traffic sharing our home network is sound engineering.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This is how Wi-Fi works in our homes already. Like we have a single network. It comes from one vendor, but I think that it's, you know, we're applying bias from legacy or past other technologies where you have a hub from each vendor to be scared of a single network. But I think to what Stuart said, you know, this is how the web works. This is how Wi-Fi works. The application layer needs to be secure. And I think we can do more at the network layer to help kick off devices that are bad actors or, you know, manage the network layer. But I think it's pretty much how everything works already. And we're just extending it to low power.
Sujata, I guess, do you want to add your thoughts on like how is the market educated about this? Because security is kind of fairly critical.
Right.
You think it's like lacking understanding because Thread is like a new technology. Probably there's an understanding about Wi-Fi, but not as much of Thread.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a silicon company's perspective, I can say that product manufacturers understand security is a need, but the evolution from not having anything secure to trying to be secure, to how to get to that, they don't know how. And so it's also not a yes or no. It's what level of security, how much protection are you giving against what type of attacks, and how do you build for that? And so having Thread and Matter take these into consideration in designing it into the technology from the beginning and tying it all together, I think is really important to be able to enable product manufacturers and ecosystems to deliver on that security and privacy experience that consumers want now and are more aware of now, you know?
Yeah. Great. Mark, you have any thoughts on security?
I think I agree with the points that have been shared so far. I guess maybe one question I would have for somebody else on the panel would be maybe to talk a little bit about some of the resources if people want to learn more. Maybe Chris, from the CSA perspective, if people are interested to learn more about security and privacy around Matter.
Thanks. So I'll echo that everyone's answers were really great. The one thing I would say about Matter, and I talked about it in my talk, was the fact that it's easy, right? It has to be really easy such that developers don't disable it or anything like that. And so that's sort of built into the SDK, let's say. And then as far as resources go, there is a white paper available on our website that has a lot of the information on what defense in depth is and what those different layers are that Matter supports. And I believe there's some resources on Thread
But
too.
there's also a webinar that Matter did about security and privacy that's available for viewing the recording. And then Thread has a white paper coming about security, and then some basic security information in existing white papers about security, but we're getting close to releasing a focused focused white paper. But yeah.
I forgot about the video of that.
Get involved in the Matter working group too, because there's a lot of work going on security and how to implement it, right? So.
Cool. So from a product standpoint, Nathan, I guess, do you see this to be a thing that your customers worry about, ask you about, question about it?
I think, yeah, I mean, in general, sure. People are always concerned about privacy, and most people are not informed about how it works and not informed about what is and is not private. So the technical details, it's good to have all the different layers from the networking to the application layer. It is challenging to explain that to users. Apple's probably done a good job of saying trust us by default. So maybe Thread and Matter have to figure out the same way to do. I don't know.
So there's some work to be done there for both, not only CSA but also Thread Group, to keep educating the market on security.
Yeah.
All right, so let's change some gears and talk a bit about. We're seeing quite a bit of momentum with obviously Thread and Thread products in the marketplace. What are your thoughts on the momentum, and what has surprised you in what you've seen? And this can be a question for Chris as well, from an external viewpoint. Like, what do you see as what has surprised you from the momentum for Thread?
I mean, not sure. I mean, there's a lot of devices coming out soon. I think Nanoleaf has been one of the big ones that have just pushed the boundaries on what can be done. In terms of making all their devices border routers, for example. I think that's just a great sort of result of the work that you guys are doing here. And then sort of, go ahead and use my devices as your gateway device, and that's, I think what Stuart was saying earlier as well, that's just going to help the strength of the network. I wasn't necessarily thinking that we would see that kind of thing. And that's probably the one surprise for me.
I can take this. It's kind of a personal story, but I was involved with the Thread group kind of early in some of the earlier days, and I stepped out for a couple of years and did some other career things. But the question of the day back then was like, what's going to be the border router? What's a border router? And like, if you look fast forward to today, it's super exciting to see. Now we've got major global ecosystems that have publicly announced border router support in-field products, and that'll be coming to market. So that to me is one of the most exciting things about the momentum. But I think we're also in like the very early days. Like, everybody right now is focused on getting this unified network and connectivity and the security and onboarding. And so what I'm particularly excited about is like, once we get that foundation built and we can turn all of our energy as an industry to innovation above and beyond the base connectivity, I think we're going to see things that we can't even imagine today. Kind of like the early days of the internet. Like, it took a long time to get TCP/IP developed and stuff, but once that's there, like, look at what the internet is today, and like, we couldn't have imagined that 20 years ago. And then the second part of your question was about what surprised me, and I think, if you'd asked me like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, like, what's going to happen? What would you expect to happen with these standardization activities if the whole world shut down for 2 years and everybody's going to work from home and, virtually no travel, airplanes grounded? I would have said, well, you probably would hit pause for 2 years. And I think what surprised me is it's actually, we didn't miss a beat. And everybody's worked really well globally, and virtual test events, and just like how we've used tools and, things like Slack to communicate with each other. It's actually in some ways maybe even sped things up versus waiting for like quarterly in-person events. So
yeah, that's a good point. I guess in the last 18 months,
like enabling more people to contribute.
Yeah, I guess the most announcements we've seen in the pandemic time, which is also, definitely. Anybody else?
So, since I've been working on marketing for Thread since the beginning, one of the nice surprises for me is I always thought of Thread as an ingredient brand, because it's the base technology, the network transport, not something that consumers really care about. But the benefits that it delivers translates to the user experience so well that it was really exciting and surprising for me to see the way the market received products and talked about the Thread experience versus the previous experience. Like the Belkin Wemo scene controller got a lot of great reviews after they enabled Thread on it, and so it was really exciting and surprising to see that those benefits and that user experience that we defined, even though our target audience for Thread Group were the developers themselves, it really translates to the products in the market too.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, building on the border router topic, that's what surprised me. We've known from the start that we need border routers. And that's why at Apple, we worked on making the HomePod Mini and the Apple TV add that functionality. But we also realized that we don't want Apple to be the only vendor that offers these. We want people to have a choice. So it didn't really surprise me that Google did the same thing. Eero doing it is nice because that's another option. And if you want to upgrade your Wi-Fi network in the house, you get Thread as well. We knew in principle that products like the Nanoleaf light strips could offer this. Any device that's got Ethernet and Thread or Wi-Fi and Thread can have this functionality. So we knew that was possible in theory. What surprised me was that the announcement came out so fast. The ink is barely dry on the 1.3 spec, and Nanoleaf is already announcing this. So that was really cool, and I hope other vendors will too.
John?
Yeah, well, just one thing that surprised me was we've always viewed Thread as the low power alternative to Wi-Fi, right? And at Nest, we did the same thing. We built our whole ecosystem around battery powered devices targeting Thread. But a lot of the key benefits that users actually see today is also the low latency aspect of it, which people would say, oh, if I want low latency, I'm just going to use Wi-Fi. But that's, there's line powered device, like the Nanoleaf devices, they're line powered, right? It's not, they don't need to be low power, but they do get a great experience from its low latency as well. So that one was a surprise for me. The other surprise is just really how quickly, when someone decides we're going to integrate Thread, I guess to Stuart's point, how quickly that can happen. It's not really about the difficulty of getting that technology into a product, right? I think we've shown across multiple organizations now that Thread is here. You can just put it in a product. It's really just about getting the mindset to do it.
Anybody else? Oh, okay. Yeah, Evan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to echo again what Sujata said. I mean, not to say that it was surprising that the experience was great and fast and snappy. That's why we chose Thread. But to actually see that an ingredient brand could get picked up by the media and identified. And we've actually had like proactive people coming from the press. They're like, is it ready for this with this? And all of the different pieces that still have to come together. With Matter and timing and everything coming together with different ecosystem players. But and also to echo Jonathan, with the ease of implementing open threads into our products, and just the power of the internet protocol that unlocks these both.
Yeah, I think the open thread is a key part of the ecosystem that has really enabled this too. I mean, as Stuart mentioned, just to second that, I mean, we were surprised at the number of other border routers that came so fast. We didn't expect that. So that was a surprise for me as well. All right, so switching gears, I guess, between Matter and Thread, and Chris, and this is a question for everybody else as well. What are the key innovation opportunities do you see between Matter and Thread? Like, what is the abstraction layer between the network layer and the application layer? Do you see that merging? What could be key, opportunities for us to innovate there?
Yeah, so I think of it from a technology perspective as like a couple of problems that need to be solved. One is long range. So a lot of these are coming from your slides. I'll mention that, but I'll also say that, I've had some Thread devices and the range on it is actually already phenomenal. So I think it's more sort of outdoor range or through wall type range that is probably something that's sort of needed below Matter. And then the other one, which I'm not sure we could solve directly with IP, and maybe this is a sort of challenge for you guys, but is batteryless. Some kind of interoperability batteryless solution for commercial would be something that would be extremely valuable.
Anybody else? Matter and
I'll take a crack at it. I think, the initial focus on Matter and Thread has been around be it consumer, smart home, residential, but I think there's a lot of adjacencies around multi-dwelling units and getting into commercial buildings and stuff. That's clearly been a big part of Thread as well. But I think there's an opportunity to between Thread and Matter and CSA to pursue some of these other market adjacencies as well.
Are there like some key problems that need to be solved? I guess, Gabe, you've talked about network management.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly it's still early in terms of us deploying Thread into premises. And I mean, even on the Wi-Fi side, Wi-Fi is relatively a much more mature technology. We're still figuring out how to troubleshoot customer networks. So Thread is even earlier, and so I think figuring out tools and management protocols and other things to take Thread from works on the bench with 2 light bulbs to works in a 10,000 square foot property with a bunch of products. I think we have a lot to learn still. So I think a big part of that will be the community of sharing knowledge, sharing what we find, and then figuring out how to solve it together. Because I think no one product or device maker can figure it out on their own.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So I guess moving on to the next question. So some of the key benefits of smart homes is really convenience, safety, and energy savings, right? Do you see other benefits?
So I mentioned this before, but I mean, I think one of the huge target areas that's of interest to me, and I haven't been able to get members to raise their hand and put work onto this yet, but is home healthcare. Sort of aging in place, just monitoring in general. You can sort of do a video chat with your doctor now, but if you had the equipment in home to just step on a scale or put a blood pressure monitor on or something like that, and then get that information securely with HIPAA requirements met, yada, yada, through to your doctor, I think that's an extremely valuable.
The telemedicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and the whole space there, like I said, aging in place as well, and monitoring.
Any others?
Well, this is not exactly a different one, but I'll emphasize what you said about energy saving. I think that has a lot of potential. In my house, I have things that don't need to be running when nobody's there. And I have a HomeKit rule so that when nobody's home, it shuts those off. And when we come back, it turns them back on. And that adds up to quite a bit of energy saving over the days and weeks. So if I had to go around manually turning the switches off and turn them back on when I came home, I would just never do it. But when it happens automatically, then across the whole population, that adds up to a lot of energy saving. That adds up to a lot of diesel power plants that don't need to run. And we're in a situation where the world has to be careful about energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's benefits for the user, but also like the whole impact on climate change.
I can add one more. Yes, you mentioned energy savings and cost savings, and I think energy is one of the easiest ones to point to today on how consumers can save money in their homes. But I think there's a lot of other future like preventive maintenance applications. We were talking at lunch, and Sujata mentioned that there's like a pipe that burst in Texas. Like they had what do you call it? Snowpocalypse last year, where they got, freezing temperatures in Austin and knocked
out the whole power system.
Yeah. Like a pipe burst and that's a huge mess. I think there's a lot of things like that we've all thought about these, but they're not mainstream yet.
Right.
And so I think getting solutions that are, everyday consumers can pick up, install easily, and use them to detect leaks, detect gas leaks. There's a ton of different things. Maybe it's detecting that your washing machine is vibrating differently than it did last month. And so maybe you need to have somebody come look at it. There's endless possibilities.
And there's an insurance angle to that too, right? Like insurance companies want to help get that technology in and then get that information out. So that's
a good point.
Yeah.
I would add, I'm just thinking more, I have my parents and they are starting to get some smart home products, but it's me and my husband are like IT support for them, and what should they buy? How do they install it? Who can install it? And so how can we as an industry kind of make this really mainstream where you don't have to be kind of a techie person to make things, not just install them, but use them and get the value out of them? Because a lot of people, I think, have some sort of smart device in their home that they're not really even using, So I think that's an area to try to figure out how to drive.
Chris talked about insurance, and It reminded me of a little tidbit. Some people probably know, but a lot of people don't. We're used to seeing the UL certification on electrical products that say they're safe. That is not a government agency. UL is the underwriters' laboratories set up by the insurance companies because they didn't want to have to pay when people's houses burned down. So we have a long history of the insurance companies wanting to keep people safe because they don't want to be wasting money.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we've seen quite a bit of, I guess, momentum on smart homes and Thread, kind of mostly in the US and parts of, I guess, Europe. What are your thoughts about the other markets, particularly China, India, in terms of products, I guess?
Well,
Nathan, you want to take a stab at that first, and then we can have everybody else chime in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Nanoleaf is a company, we're headquartered in Toronto, but we also have just as large an office in Shenzhen. So we have a number of China natives. WeChat is ingrained into everything. And, there's a different set of smart home players, I think. Not entirely different set, but, Xiaomi and others in China. From a technology perspective, I think Bluetooth mesh has made quite a number of inroads there. Thread is still not well known and understood. Maybe that will change it. I think I saw Xiaomi is a new member on the slides there. So, there's also a different perspective on like what products people use and what the use cases and what they need. Like our CTO wanted to put a sound sensor into one of our products, and he said, in China, it's very common. You go through stairwells and you stomp to make sure the lights come on. Mm-hmm. Whereas like here, I don't know about you guys, but like I'd never think that. So it's different, different cultural things to it.
Yeah, I think what I was going to add is customers get equipment very differently in other parts of the world, which a lot of our members from Europe and Asia know better than I do. And, we try to sell products at retail in Europe, and like customers don't buy Wi-Fi routers from a retail store in Germany. It's just not a thing. And so I think it's, working with service providers and professional installers and, other types of companies that meet the customers in the way that they already know how to get products, rather than sort of assuming it will work how it does in North America, which it doesn't.
Yeah.
In the board meetings this week, we were looking at the membership profiles and just where companies are coming from and interest. And there's very global interest in Thread. I was kind of shocked to see some of the numbers just in terms of the distribution. It's really a global group, and there's very strong interest in other parts of the world. The fact that Thread uses international, standards, that it is using the frequency band that's available globally, that it's an agnostic to the application layer, it's really like a perfect foundation for any other regional standards that want to
global adoption in some ways.
Yeah, and I think to your question though, from Thread Group's perspective, it's also about educating the China market more. I think like technologies like Bluetooth and Zigbee and Wi-Fi have been around for a long time. So I'll make a shameless plug that we're forming a China regional marketing chapter in Thread Group, and we already have some member companies that are driving that. So members will start getting communication about that and how to get involved. But the idea is that group would be running in China in whatever format and time and priorities they think are necessary for the China market, and we'll also be doing a public announcement about it to drive it. But I think I see personally from the silicon company's perspective, more questions coming in from the China market about what is Thread. So I think the timing is right now to do that education.
So with the point that Mark made about increasing membership as well as questions coming in, there is quite a bit of signals we are seeing. There's interest in China. Yeah, that's great. So I'm now going to open up the floor for questions from the audience. I'm out of questions, but I have one fun question, which I'll ask after the audience question. So anybody from the audience wants to ask the panel a question?
Hello. So I had a question around, so I've been hearing I'm still new to Matter in a sense, and learning that Matter will be supported on Thread as well as Wi-Fi. And we talk about a lot of energy savings when we come to Thread. how do we, is from the marketing perspective, is there an effort being made to understand how much of energy savings can we get if we shift to thread from Wi-Fi? The reason I'm saying is from a consumer perspective. If I'm new to the technology and if I'm not familiar how much energy savings I'm going to get with thread, would I make an extra effort to understand the new technology or just use Matter over Wi-Fi? Because Matter is flat, it's agnostic and you can work with Matter, and I know Wi-Fi, so that's the piece. How do we know that Wi-Fi will not beat thread when we talk with Matter, basically?
One thing that is very clear today, and I don't see this changing anytime soon, is Wi-Fi chips have got pretty power efficient. They maybe use half a watt ballpark, which is okay for something plugged into AC, but for a battery powered device, that's no good. If you've got sensors, like I use the Eve door and window sensors on my garden gates so that I know when people come and go, I don't have to change the battery every week. Those run on a half-size AA battery for 2 years using thread, and I get instant notifications. When I test it, I stand there and I push the gate, and it's as if there's a physical wire. There's no noticeable lag between opening the gate and seeing the notification on my phone, and my Apple Watch buzzes. That would not be possible with Wi-Fi. Now, there's other things Wi-Fi is good for, like security cameras. Streaming 4K video is not something you're going to do over thread and get acceptable image quality. So these technologies are complementary. One of the other things I have is, a few years ago, I installed a bunch of HomeKit light switches, which are all Wi-Fi, and they may only take maybe half a watt each. But by the time you've got 20 or 30 light switches in your house, that's just a lot of phantom power being drawn 24 hours a day. If I could do that today with thread-based light switches, I would do that in an instant instead of Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to show consumers the benefit of Wi-Fi versus thread is really just to compare the differences between actual products that are on shelf today, right? So, if we just look at door locks, there are Wi-Fi based door locks, there are thread based door locks, and the lifetimes are, months versus years on those. In fact, most recently, there's this Schlage door lock that supports both Wi-Fi and thread and Bluetooth, right? And they actually advertise that if you're using Wi-Fi, it's 3 months of lifetime. Whereas if you introduced a HomePod, it's a HomeKit door lock, but if you introduce a HomePod Mini or an Apple TV, that lifetime automatically goes up to 2 years, right? So if we can figure out a way to make that very obvious to the consumer, and I think some of the organic social media and some of the other news that we've seen that really are comparing the benefits of thread to other technologies, we really should try to amplify that as much as possible.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I'd love to see in the thread marketing material as a device maker, here's the breakdown. And it's actually stuff that comes from Silicon Labs, the NXPs, the Nordics of the world.
Good question. Any other questions? All right. So I guess time for the final fun question. So we're going to start with Gabe. What's your favorite smart home experience? And you can go around.
Yeah, I think my favorite smart home experience right now. So we had a baby 5 months ago, and
Congratulations.
thank you. And we have an Eve button. It's like the 3-way button that uses thread through HomePod, and it's in our nursery. And there's like 2 lighting modes and turning the lights off. And like my wife totally latched onto it. Of like, when it's time to put the baby to bed, we tap the button and the noise machine comes on, the lights go down, and the blinds close, and like the room is prepared for sleep, and it works really great. It's easy.
That's great.
Yeah, that's hard to beat. I'll go the opposite. So if I look back a few years ago, having teenagers, so you had the baby, I had the teenagers, but having cameras now, like everybody has the video doorbell and cameras, and just making it impossible for my daughter to sneak out of the house. We have so much to look forward to.
So we seem to all have kid-related. So mine's also kid-related. So I actually didn't really adopt smart home products until thread-based products came to market. So like some of the first smart bulbs that we had in the home were the Nanoleaf bulbs, right? And of course, my kids now are like 7 and 5, right? So they initially grew up with standard, you flip a physical light switch and the lights, and it's a single color, right? And all of a sudden, one day, the light just started changing colors and turning on and off without anybody else in the room, and that really freaked them out. Right. And, we would be upstairs and they would run upstairs and say, "Hey, Daddy, what, did you see the light?" I'm like, "No, I'm up here." It's like, it turned red. Yeah. Well, so that's the second part, not related to Thread, but, the intercom feature on these smart speakers, right? Then related to the ghost story, I can now, they're like, "Daddy, your voice just came out of the chimney." So yeah, they started to get really freaked out, and I actually had to stop because it was going too far. But that was certainly the highlight.
Cool. Mark, I'll continue the trend. There's just so many good baby stories now. I've got a 2-year-old son, and we had a Nest camera pointed on his crib so we could try to see if he, is up or trying to escape from his crib. Yesterday, I got a text in the middle of the meetings, and my wife sent a picture of him climbing over the railing for the first time, and he escaped from his crib. And so the next thing I'm going to do when I get home is I'm going to put a contact sensor on the baby gate to make sure that before I go to bed, the baby gate is shut.
That's a good one.
My example is kind of a fun and silly one. I don't have young children anymore, but maybe I have some friends who are still a bit childish. And we had a birthday party for one of my good friends. And we decided for the birthday party to put up a disco ball in the kitchen. So I unscrewed the chandelier and we installed the disco ball with its motor to turn it. But a disco ball only really works if you've got light shining on it. So then I climbed up and installed some spotlights on top of the kitchen cabinets, but you don't have to climb up and down a ladder to turn the spotlights on and off every time. So I plugged those into some smart plugs and set up a HomeKit automation rule. So when you turn the switch on for the disco ball to spin, the spotlights come on, and when you turn it off, they turn off again. So
That's awesome.
that's what we have in our house right now until I take it down.
Nathan?
So yeah, on the kid front, I think these guys are all sugarcoating it because my house is a complete test bed and my kids hate it. So they're 3 and 5. They actually like it better than my wife does. But yeah, my favorites, I'll cheat a little bit. It's actually something we're working on that's not ready, but can't talk about it too much. But I think it's going to be pretty exciting. But stuff that exists today, it's not actually really smart home. I guess it kind of is, but the AirPod setup experience, that's just so seamless. And it's almost a challenge, I think between Matter and between the Thread group, we need to find a way to make that kind of the standard. It's like what Chris said, has to be a straight line, right? None of this,
Swiggly
ball of yarn, right?
Chris?
So I'm going to go completely opposite way, and then I'll come back to kids at the end. But so I've had it 3 or 4 times, and actually someone in the room has experienced this in my house as well. I have a totally messed up house. It has HomeKit, it has Amazon, it has everything you could possibly imagine, and then devices with rules connected in clouds, or if this, then that, and many, many times lights have just started randomly going on or randomly going off. With the meeting with Ann years ago, we were working on some Matter thing late at night, and the lights just kept going off in the room, and it was a video thing. So she couldn't, I had to get back up. It turned out that the battery was dead, and every 30 seconds it was detecting it as no motion. So some wacky set of rules turned the lights off. And just recently, a bunch of rules just sort of randomly came back from the dead, like deleted rules from years ago sort of came back. And Mark, I'm going to talk to you about that later. And I literally had to remove the devices and re-add them in order to get that to go away. But then on the kid front, my daughter found that button when she was about 3 and constantly kept pushing the button. And we could not get the button away from her because she loved the lights on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's.
What about you?
Oh, for me, I guess, I mean, mine is a pretty simple kind of a thing. I just like the music mode with Nano Leaf. I just turn that on and like, that's my best experience in the home. All right, so let's raise a round of applause for the panel.